What did you bring to the role of Chrissy Snow that wasn't on the page?
I remember thinking, they want me to play a dumb blonde. People hate dumb blondes. They irritate everybody. How can I play a dumb blonde that is likable? And that's when I really started thinking about the box I would build for her, of what she would and wouldn't do, which I realized that was instinct. Now I learned that that's a technique that they teach in acting school to create a box. I just knew this somehow inherently. I know what I pick up. As a child of an alcoholic, you learn to measure people, adapt to people. What kind of mood are you in? Can I trust you? You become very perceptive if you're not absolutely flat out ruined by it. And so I knew at that time what kind of beautiful women annoyed me, the ones who were all full of themselves and thought they were beautiful. So, and it was the way I lived my life too. I just abandoned any sense of what I look like, how people responded. Absolute, just free and pure. And I kept thinking of puppies and actually copied a dog's hairstyle, because I was trying to think, after the first year, I thought something's not working. And one day I was sitting at this outdoor cafe on Sunset Boulevard, and this woman walks by and she's got 2 Afghan dogs. And I remember looking at the dogs going, cool hair. They had hair hanging down in their faces and they had 2 ponytails. So I went home and I pulled my hair down and put the 2 ponytails and I went, this is so perfect. And then I had now a makeup artist, because that was the first time I ever had a makeup artist, and we talked and he said, well, you know, Chrissy Snow should have snow white hair and big pink cheeks and dark eyes. And I said, and the hairdo should be like an Afghan dog. And we created this look. This makeup artist was Bjorn. He died later of AIDS. But the look so totally changed in year 3. And the dog really worked. And the personality was like a puppy. So it was likable. It was non-threatening. If you can play a beautiful, naive girl who the women like and the men like, and nobody's threatened, you've figured something out.
Now, there was a story about the kind of asymmetric ponytails that had to do with that your hair was damaged or something.
Every Friday, because I had snow white hair and my hair grew fast, every Friday there'd be like a dark line down, even though my hair is blonde, but the contrast was so. So I'd go to this beauty salon and she would put the bleach right on the roots, just right on the roots. But she was on the phone one day with Rod Stewart, because she was doing his hair at the same time, and I'm sitting there, and I don't know how long it's supposed to be on, and I hear her say, oops, and she comes over to me, and she rubs with a towel on my head, and this big clump of hair comes out, and I've got to do a show that night. So that's when I started pulling it over this way and making the one. It was really just to hide this bald spot that was under there, and that caught on. In fact, one night, I was in the makeup room, and the audience was there, and we're trying to get this in. It was a little tricky because it was a camouflage thing and getting enough height so we can get it right in the right place. And I had a thing about the ponytail had to have just the right oomph. Couldn't be flat, couldn't be too low. And Mickey Ross comes in and he screams, because the audience is out there. He says, this is not a show about hair. So I'm scared and I go out there and they do introductions and they bring me out. The audience that night had been all school children, and every little girl in the audience had one ponytail. And I looked at Mickey and I said, maybe it's kind of about hair.
That's great. What about the laugh, the snort laugh? How did that originate?
I actually do snort when I laugh, and I laughed in rehearsal one day, and they all said, keep it! so it stayed.
It is funny. It's funny.
Well, you know, it also is such an abandoned thing. You know, when you snort, you're really having a big belly laugh. So.
What about your relationship with the producers? You talked about Mickey Ross, but some of the other producers, Don Nickel and Bernie West, Ted Bergman.
I would say the 2 that I interacted with the most Mickey Ross. He was my mentor. Ted Bergman and I had a wonderful relationship all the way through because Ted's a businessman. He wasn't into show business at all. It was all about bottom line for him. And I was selling tickets. When you're selling tickets, they really like you. And I remember the year before I left Three's Company, we had a cast party, the very last show. And he took me aside and he said, I want to tell you something. He said, you're now in a category with Lucy. Now, I'm not saying this. This is just what he said to me. And he said, your performance tonight was just as good as a comedic performance can get. And I remember that night, it was the handcuff show, I believe it was, it really was kind of comedically perfect in retrospect. And it was sad a year later when all these relationships just fell apart and it became so adversarial.
The episode you're talking about, handcuffed, you were handcuffed to John Ritter,
I was
right?
handcuffed to John.
And he had to go on a date,
Yes.
and you had to make it as if you
Like
weren't handcuffed,
we
to
were
right?
handcuffed together.
Which sounds
So-
like pure farce.
And then by then I knew what farce was. And, if he had a drink, my hand got pulled. If I had a drink, I'd pull his. I have to say, at the end of the week, my wrists and his wrists were both bloody and bruised from pulling one another because but God, it was fun, and it was so funny. Really funny.
Was that kind of the epitome of the show about about the third season or so?
Yes.
When
yeah.
you really kind of got what that rhythm was and
Yeah.
your relationship with John Ritter on camera.
Yeah, that year 3 became magical for me, and it became magical with John and I, and really, I've never worked with anybody as superb as John Ritter. I can't say enough good things about John Ritter.
Why do you think the fans loved the show and loved it so quickly?
Well, remember at the time, 2 girls and a guy living together in an apartment, that was almost scandalous. I mean, there was a lot of religious groups who are writing in, who are upset about the concept, which is strange in today's world, of pornography and everything that's on television. But what it represented to little kids, especially girls, was safety. That when they left home, they could move into their own apartment, maybe go to school or maybe get their first jobs. And if they had a guy living with them, it would be safe, but it was non-sexual. Safe in a sexual way, safe in a protective way. And it was very appealing to little girls. And the idea of playing house, 3 kids playing house in an apartment, was very appealing to little kids.
But it was double entendre all the way.
All the time.
So I guess you could say it was maybe done on 2 levels in a way. If the young people didn't really get the what I call DEs, the
Right.
double entendres. But was there ever discussions about taking it to a place that would have been called, I guess, jumping the shark, where something would have happened between the character of Jack Tripper and you,
Never,
or was it?
never came up. And Chrissy Snow was a virgin. I think I was kissed once. And if you ever see the episode where she's kissed, John is pacing and Joyce is pacing. Because really, if you analyze what happened to the show, it went in a direction where John and Joyce became the parents, and Chrissy was the child. So when Chrissy had this date, John was very nervous about it, and he opens the door to see if she's home yet, and there's Chrissy hanging on to this guy, I wish I could remember his name, with her feet up behind her. She looked like a colt, and you knew it was just the greatest kiss of her life, but it wasn't sexual. It wasn't going to lead to anything because that was not where her head was. Again, it was safe. That's why the parents liked her, why the little girls liked her.
What did you think about the controversy that the series kind of brewed up among different groups, the feminists, the fact that it was seen as risque, things like that?
At that time when this controversy would come up, I just wish it would go away, so I don't want anything to get in the way of our being able to do this show. The show was so fun. I never focused on it. I never gave any interviews about it. I never talked about it because I really didn't have a point of view on it. I thought it was very, from the life that I had come from, this is about as tame a lifestyle as I could imagine. So I didn't involve myself with it that I can recall.
Did Chrissy grow through the years, or is Chrissy the kind of character that really wasn't supposed to grow?
Chrissy was not supposed to grow. That's why when years later, when it came up of doing a new version of Three's Company in a movie, I couldn't figure out how to do Chrissy if she had had life experiences. She was now sexual, maybe had children, maybe been married, maybe been divorced. What happens to her soul? She was so pure. She was the puppy. And I never quite could figure out how I could age her. It's not about that she had to stay young looking. How do you keep the soul that pure in a life? And I think maybe she was there for that moment in time only.
What did you learn about physical acting from John Ritter, and also your experience just doing the show?
I learned from watching John Ritter what physical comedy was, that it was a form of dance, that, again, in life you don't plan your moves. You don't plan what you're going to do with your hand or your foot, or if you're going to trip over this thing. And in rehearsal, I just would not plan anything and see what happened. And then it went further on show night. They always had an isolated camera on John and myself, which did not make Joyce very happy, because in the show, what you thought was going to be the laugh may not be the laugh where the audience was there. And it was like a live play, and both of us, because we had an isolated camera, could go with it. John could go with it sometimes forever, tripping, falling, doing. And my thing was not so much physical. It was eyes, face takes, body takes. Just a lot of shock. She was just shocked a lot at things, And I had a lot of fun playing with my face.
There was sexual tension between your character and Jack. Certainly the audience picked up on that, and I think liked that.
Right.
Did you feel that was more of an organic, natural thing, the way you guys worked together, or was it something you actually discussed and maybe analyzed how to do that?
Oh, never discussed it. Again, John and I didn't plan anything. And his MO as Jack Tripper was just to get his hands on one of us, Janet or Chrissy. And my MO was always, no, Jack, was that kind of thing. So it just would always happen. The right thing would happen with the two of us, always.
At the height of the popularity of the show, the three of you were on the cover of Newsweek, I think in 1978. But from what I understand, the reaction was that it seemed to your other castmates that you seemed to be more prominent in that picture. And then the title of the I guess the article was about sex, I think.
Sex on TV.
What was your reaction to that, and what happened?
Well, the producers knew in front that they were going to feature me, but didn't tell any of us. Didn't want to create, the truth is always best. They didn't want to create any imbalances there, get anybody's feathers ruffled. So I come down as naively as the other two, and we start taking pictures, and the photographer says, Suzanne, why don't you get down here in front? And Joyce, why don't you bite on Suzanne's shoulder? And John, why don't you bite on Suzanne's other shoulder? And I'm realizing he keeps pushing me here, and John and Joyce got upset, and they went off, and I go back behind the set to Don Nichols, and I said, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm very uncomfortable, and I don't know what he's doing, and he said, I have no idea why he's putting you in front. So it was just a lot of not telling the truth, and John and Joyce always thought that I knew in front, and I really didn't. And then when it came out, it was the biggest selling issue of Newsweek, I think, ever at that time. And it was so, there I was in this teddy with no bra, and just sexier than I realized it was, and one strap had fallen. He got it just at that point. Joyce is biting this shoulder, John is biting that shoulder. It started the tension. And then the week after that, I was featured on 60 Minutes, and then featured on 2020, and then Barbara Walters, and my career started really getting some heft behind it. All of which in a show, when you walked in on the first day and said, I don't know anything, I don't know why I'm here, I've never taken acting, I'm so grateful. As this thing started building, it created probably what it's like in a family of siblings when one becomes a famous one. It's not that they're unhappy for you, but they're not happy for you. And as someone who studied the human condition endlessly and written a lot of books about it, I see exactly where it all could have been handled better. And it's the public who decides who's going to emerge from the show. The producers were mad that my character was emerging so much. They were mad. They were always squelching it because they had planned for John to emerge, and John did, but they had no idea that this character was going to come out there too. And Joyce, who came from all the background and the contract and so studied, it was just very hard emotionally to take. And probably if our producers had more skill as in a therapeutic way, it could have been talked out and explained how when one succeeds in the show, we all succeed, because that's really what happens. You know, do you think they were handled a lot better on Happy Days when the Fonz, who was a low level actor, emerged as the star? And there was never, you still see Ron Howard and Henry Winkler together, they're good friends. Somehow Gary Marshall, as a producer, handled that better and explained to everybody in whatever way he did that as one person succeeds, we all succeed. This one goes higher, we all go higher. So that's where the flaw in Three's Company was, and difficult for the public to understand because we looked like the happiest little family there ever was.
That sounds to be one of the components of why things got a little rocky. What you just described about how you'd think that if there was a breakout character, it would be something that producers and studios would wish for,
dream,
nothing more.
Yes, right. Yay, it worked.
What about your manager at the time? Were there decisions made then that also affected this whole kind of mix of what was going on? I mean, you had to deal with CBS too.
Right. Jay Bernstein, who was brilliant. And I had gone to Jay Bernstein after the first 6 weeks of Three's Company, which was the first pickup, and it was very clear this was a hit. And I said to him, I don't know how long this show will stay on. I will give you all my money that I'm making off of Three's Company for these first 6 episodes if you will make sure that I have enough visibility that if Three's Company doesn't succeed, that I can use that to get another show. And he said later, he didn't think I was particularly good looking, didn't know if I was talented. He said, but I'd never seen that kind of tenacity since Sammy Davis Jr. And he took all my money too. And I was happy to give it to him. Now that I wasn't making a lot of money at first. I think they were paying us something like, could it be $1,500 an episode? I don't know. But Jay Bernstein then, with the success of Farrah Fawcett and the success of Suzanne Summers, started managing in a way that just ticked everybody off everybody at CBS. He said to me one day, I'm selling your hiatuses. Now, I don't know anything, and I'm just being lulled along in this. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, ABC owns you during the season, but they don't own your hiatuses, and I'm going to sell your hiatuses to CBS. Well, once that was announced, Fred Silverman called me, and he said, how dare you? I made you, I put you on, and now you go, and I had said to him, which was true, I said, before I signed this deal, I called you. I called you at ABC, and they put Steve, I think it was Steve Ross on, and I told Steve that, my manager wants to sell my hiatuses to CBS, can you tell Fred? But Steve Ross went off and got in an accident, got killed, and that message never got to Fred Silverman, so I never heard back, so I figured they didn't care, so I signed it. It created now ABC's mad at me. And CBS is thrilled because they've got ABC's biggest star. It was a bad move on Jay Bernstein's part and naive of me to do it. But again, remember, I walked in, I don't know anything. I've never been in this business. I've never had an acting lesson. I have a manager who seems to know more about this business than I do, and I let myself be taken along. So now I get them kind of mad at me on the set because my heft is growing. I got ABC mad at me, so they're no longer putting me on specials and things that are ABC because we're going to do that, build you up so you can go be a CBS star. It kind of got out of balance. And then Jay Bernstein would call me and work on my head, and he'd say, "You're slipping." "What do you mean I'm slipping?" "Well, I've got Farrah on 4 covers this month. You're only on 2. That's not a good sign." And he'd get me all revved up inside, because now I'm thinking, am I going to lose this great thing I have? It was a false stress that was being created, all because I didn't know what I was doing. So I kept doing good work, but people were getting mad at me.
About, I guess, mid-series, or maybe after 3 seasons, when the Ropers left,
Yes.
the characters, and then Don Knotts came on board
Yes.
as Mr. Furley. How did that change the dynamic for the show, for you and the rest of the cast?
It didn't really affect the 3 of us, John and Joyce and I. We liked working with Don, and he was a master of timing, and so sweet, so unassuming, so sweet. You know, we had to create more jeopardy downstairs, so it was Furley and his brother Bart owned the building, and it wasn't as solid as it was with the Ropers, but I think it worked. It worked. Of course it worked. And then they brought in a character called Lana, which didn't really work, but it was a sexual foil for John Ritter.
Let's do some very quick word association. I'm going to name a cast member, just your first thought. Okay. Audra Lindley.
Pro. Total pro.
Norman Fell.
Total pro, and underneath a sweetheart.
Richard Klein.
Excellent. Played that character, that sleazy, greasy character, perfect.
Don Knotts.
Just charming, talented, great timing.
Joyce DeWitt.
Excellent, and a pro.
And John Ritter.
The best actor I've ever worked with.
Were guest stars important to the show at all, or was it really? Did it really not matter?
Well, we had some interesting guest stars like John Larroquette and Lonnie Anderson, and it was always fun to play off of them. We didn't need guest stars, really. The show was about the 3 people in the apartment and the occasional Larry coming up and the Furley coming up. My favorite guest star, and I can't remember his name, he was my boyfriend, and he was a policeman, and I liked him because when he laughed, he snorted too. And we just thought we found the perfect one in each other.
During your run on Three's Company, you started performing in Vegas.
Uh-huh.
How did that come about?
I said to my husband one day, "Did you know I sing?" He said, "Do you?" I said, "I do." I said, "I used to sing in all the musicals, and I really like to sing, and I would like to go to Las Vegas." And then I also got a deal with CBS to do my first television special, and the television special was such a success. It was Suzanne Summers and 6,000 Sailors, my husband's concept, which really, how can you fail when you take a troupe of dancing girls in front of 6,000 sailors on the USS Ranger? It was really quite good. And so Alan went to Las Vegas, and he went from hotel to hotel because he wanted a 2-year deal. And he finally got a 2-year deal at the MGM Grand with this guy, Bernie Rothkopf, who was running the hotel at that time. And Alan describes it as this long office. He walked in the door of his office, and Bernie's at the end, sitting there writing. He doesn't even look up. My husband walks all the way down to his desk, and Bernie finally puts his pen down and says, "What do you want?" And Alan said, "I want a 2-year deal for Suzanne Summers, and I don't care what the money is." He said, "Why do you want that?" He said, "Because I know her, that if she fails the first time out, she'll figure it out, and I want to make sure she has enough opportunities to come back so that she can succeed, and I know that she will." So he made the deal, and it succeeded from the first time I was there. I stayed in Las Vegas actually for over 20 years.
With the ascension of your character Chrissy on the show, a real breakout character,
Mm-hmm.
What happened with all the contract negotiations? I mean, what eventually led? I mean, starting with maybe the Newsweek cover, but what happened that finally led to you leaving the show?
Okay, so you see, we got the Professor Higgins, Eliza Doolittle. I no longer need him. I get that. Then if my instincts tell me that, like a father who desires his daughter but knows it's wrong, but has fallen in love with me in that strange way a student-teacher thing can happen. Then I marry Alan Hamill. They're both Jewish, they're both strong, it becomes this thing. Mickey never liked my husband, and he used to tell me he's going to take your career down the drain, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and just kind of ugly. Then the stuff happened with Newsweek, and then the stuff happened with my career becoming hefty. And then it was year 6, and my contract is now up. And I say to John and Joyce at the end of the season before, my contract's up. You two have already renegotiated because you were here before. Mine's up right before the start of the season. I'm going to ask for big money and a piece of the back end, and if you two back me up because we have favored nations, we'll all get it. So I'll be the patsy. So I sent my husband in I want you to pay me what you're paying the men. I have the highest demographics of all women in television, 18 to 49. You can see I've smartened up by this point. I'm now 6 years into success and made good money, and you just learn stuff about the business. And I'm looking around and thinking, why are all the men, including John Ritter, making 10 times more? I didn't know John Ritter was making more at that time because we're supposed to have favored nations. Why are all the men getting 10 times more than me, or any of the women on television? So my husband went in, and the lawyer for ABC was George Sunderland, and my lawyer was Gunther Schiff. And Alan Hamill and Gunther Schiff walk in, and Mickey Ross is sitting in a chair. It doesn't get up when Alan walks in. ABC lawyer Sunderland looks at my lawyer and says, "You got me last time, but you're not going to get me this time," because they had negotiated the Cindy Williams, Penny Marshall deal. And ABC was paying more for Penny and Cindy than they wanted to. My lawyer right then should have backed out, really, and said, "I'm not going to do you any good here." But anyway, he didn't. So they sit down, and my husband says, "As you know, Suzanne's been on the show for 6 years now, and she has the highest demographics of all women in television in the desired ages of 18 to 49, and she's been on hundreds of magazine covers, and she brought so much publicity to the show. So she would like to be paid, which the men are averaging on television, which is $150,000 a week, and a piece of the back end." And Mickey Ross, Mickey Ross is in the chair, and he's smoking. And when Alan finishes, he throws his cigarettes up, stomps it out with his feet, leans over to my husband. He said, "You want me to share my blood with her?" And my husband stood up nose to nose and said, "Yes." And at that moment, my career was over. Done. So in the morning, when my husband had left for this meeting, he said, "This could all blow out of the water." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "So you want me to go ahead with this?" And I said, "They're not going to get rid of Chrissy." Never think that you are not replaceable. Rule number 1. So I'm waiting at home, obviously anxious. No cell phones at that time. And so I hear the front door open. And I can tell by the way the door closes and the sound of his feet walking up the stairs, that this is not good. And he walks into the living room where I'm sitting and he goes, I said, "What?" He said, "You're out." "I'm out?" He said, "You're out. It's over." So what they did do was force me to finish out the year, but diminish me to a minute at the end. They built a little side set. It was crazy what they did. They would have a police guard come meet me at the back door, walk me in. I was not allowed to see anybody from the original show. Only the wardrobe guy, who would bring me a pair of shorts and something. And my set was a chair and a phone and a lamp and one camera. And I would speak to myself on the phone and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I know she's still sick. I wish I could be there." And I did that to finish out the season. And I would usually leave in tears because it was just it just felt so like I was being punished, like I was a bad girl, brought up all my old feelings of low self-worth and all that. It was just a terrible time. And for a year after that, I went from being the number 1 actress on television in those desired demographics to now I couldn't get an interview. And it wasn't like today that negatives propel you, and you go on Hard Copy, and you go on ET, and you go on Insider and all that. There wasn't any of that. And so I sat home for the better part of a year thinking, Why did I do it? Here I had the world by the tail. Why did I blow it? Why did I think that I should be paid what they're paying the man? What did I do? And one day, I hear voices sometimes, not in a weird way. I hear a voice in my head, like a loudspeaker. It says, why are you focused on what you don't have? Why don't you focus on what it is you do have? I sat back and thought, what do I have? I have nothing. What do I have? Visibility. Wow. Everybody in this country knows my name. I have visibility. That's something. Most people will never get that. What can I do with that? And that's when I sent Alan in to Vegas. And went in, and 5 years later, I walked up on a stage along with Frank Sinatra. He was the male entertainer of the year, and I was the female entertainer of the year. So life, the reinvention began. I went from sitcom to now headliner in Las Vegas. One night, when Frank Sinatra was in town, you could feel it. Frank Sinatra was electric, and on closing night, he would invite all the headliners to his dressing room, so I would get invited. And one night he comes up to me, he says, you know, kid, you got a good sound. I said, yeah. He said, but you're not breathing right. I said, what am I supposed to do? He said, you're singing from your wings. He said, pull from your behind. He said, you got to just feel it in your peep. And he taught me how to use not only my diaphragm when I sang, but all the muscles all the way up. I had another octave above and another octave below, just totally changed the way I sang. So that was one of those great little vignettes,
and that started as a difficult time for you, and you were a success by any means, any way of measuring it in Vegas, and the audience loved you, and the critics said good things. How did that, coming from someone who started Three's Company as a naive, young, kind of a novice,
don't know anything,
to going through a difficult time and then succeeding in another whole sort of genre or venue, what did that do for your head?
Well, I took to it. I was on a stage, remember, way back.
Right.
And this is when I walked out one night, and my mother's sitting in the front row. I thought I couldn't get any happier doing Three's Company, but when I was the queen of Las Vegas, I was happier than I'd ever been in my whole life. I loved it. I loved every night crazing up my hair and putting on the makeup and the costumes, and had 80 dancers, and I would dance down 36 steps, and I didn't even know how to dance. I just would learn a dance. I wasn't a dancer. My husband used to joke that I was the highest paid dancer in America. I never had a dancing lesson, but you know, I would want to do Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, and I'd work with Walter Painter, and he'd teach me that dance, so I would tap out there. But if you asked me to do any other tap, I couldn't do it. And then I started going on the road in the summer. And I would take my kids on the road with me, and we'd have a troupe. And it was on the road that I started writing. It was very interesting. We worked nightclubs, not much to do during the day. And I was too famous to go mingle about in the little towns that we're at. And we went to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd never been there before. And we're rummaging around the Anasazi ruins. I was just transfixed by this history we have in this country. And my husband went off walking around these cliff dwellings, and I sat on the ledge of this cliff dwelling looking out over a vista that had remained untouched for 2,000 years. Really moved by it. That night, I go to sleep. I wake up like that at 3 o'clock in the morning. In a sleep state, I pick up a yellow tablet of paper that was next to the bed, not something I've ever done before. I start writing and writing and writing and writing. At 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 hours later, my husband wakes up and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know." And I read it back to him, and I sobbed. And it is verbatim the first 60 pages of my first bestseller, well, actually my second bestseller, Keeping Secrets. And that is when I, for the first time, with some perspective, wanted to look back on what did it do to me hiding in a closet? What did all that violence do? How had it shaped me? Because I could now write it without anger and without the low self-esteem that had plagued me for so long. And it was a profound, life-changing, life-altering experience. And then it became this major bestseller, 16 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and then it became a movie. And then I went on the lecture circuit, and then people started coming up to me, you know, that's my life too, and it impacted people's lives. And now I'm in a new phase of my career, having never planned it.
After that success and the Vegas success, did you ever look back at all at what happened to Three's Company after you left with the recasting and the different, what they did with it, or you just pretty much moved forward?
I'd like to say I moved forward, but I didn't. I, to this day, feel a sadness not being able to finish out Three's Company. I see that it was important. I see that all that, I was on the news. It was on the news almost every day about my contract negotiations, and all the attention that that brought moved me to the next place. Because when Henry Lewin brought me into the Hilton in Las Vegas, he said, you know, you're very controversial. And it was the controversy that brought everybody in. So I see the perfection of it, but my heart, I had a heartache. It was terrible. I still have a heartache that it ended so badly, this wonderful thing that Joyce DeWitt to this day doesn't talk to me, that John Ritter and I made up right before he died, which I was so glad. I saw Ted Bergman at an MRI place recently, and he turned his head. He wouldn't look at me. This is 25 years later. That Mickey Ross never talked to me again. I remember one day, shortly after I left Three's Company, I was walking down Rodeo Avenue in Beverly Hills, and the wardrobe guy was coming towards me, who I was great friends with. He saw me cross the street, just shunned. So for someone who's had a lot of therapy, who requires, desires resolution, I never was able to find the resolution with, and all that's left now is Joyce, and I hope that someday we do find that resolution. So yeah, I would like to say that I said, who cares, fiddly-dee, and moved on, but a little piece of my heart got bent. But now I'm doing something that has real purpose. That book was changing people's lives. It was getting people into therapy. It was getting families talking to one another. It was being read in universities, and therapists told me that this is a book that they used. And I started seeing that everything in life has a purpose if you choose to look at it that way. My father was the perfect father. The violence was perfect. The craziness was perfect. Getting pregnant so early was perfect. Getting fired was perfect.
So these other successes that you had were ongoing in your life. How did you get involved with another sitcom, Step by Step? I mean, how did that come to you, and what was your feeling about another sitcom?
Well, it was interesting. Now I'm writing books, and maybe by the time I did Step by Step, I had written at least 3 books that I can recall at that time. And I was in contract negotiations with Michael David, a Broadway producer, to revive Annie Get Your Gun. No one had done Annie Get Your Gun since Debbie Reynolds 22 years earlier than that. And we were going to start in Japan and work from Japan across the United States, a 1.5-year commitment. And I was quite excited about it, and then end up on Broadway for however long the run would be. And I thought, this is good. I can write my books by day and do the show at night, and I've always wanted to do Broadway, and here's a dream manifesting. And we're supposed to sign, we have all the contracts in front of us, and tomorrow we'll be giving them to the lawyer with all the signatures, and I get a phone call from Tom Miller and Bob Boyette. We'd like you to come in. You don't have to read. We would like you to be the mother on this sitcom with Patrick Duffy. And all night long it was Broadway, Step by Step, Broadway, Step by Step. I figured, I've been off television for quite a while. I think my career needs to put me out there again. I think in retrospect it was absolutely the right decision. And then I go to work with Patrick Duffy, who I never had a crossword with him. We got along so great. He zigged and zagged, and I zigged and zagged. It was really a magical, wonderful, incredible 7 years. Longer on Step by Step than Three's Company, and a lot of people don't even know I did Step by Step because it was a solid hit. Where Three's Company was a runaway, Step by Step was a solid hit usually in the like 15 and 20, you know, in the ranking. And Farouk, you can't walk through the camera. Do you want it, Farouk? Do you want to?
We were talking about the long run of Step by Step, but this is a show that you said lasted a long time. This is about 10 years ago, I guess. How was that character different now that you were a mom, more mature than Chrissy Snow? And tell me a little about your approach.
Well, this was nothing to do with Chrissy Snow at all. This was me now. I was a mother. I did have teenagers. And the difference was with Chrissy Snow, you could always go for the joke. You didn't have to worry about anybody. When you're the mother of a sitcom, even if you know the funny thing would be to tell the kid, shut up, you can't. You've got to be compassionate and simpatico, because in the Miller Boyette world, there's always a scene where the violin music starts, and that's always the poignant scene. Step by step, they were looking for a breakout character, and we found one in Sasha Mitchell. And so they started after the first year, which was all about the relationship between Patrick Duffy and I, and that they always wanted to have sex, but they had so many kids they could never consummate. Once they brought in Sasha Mitchell, everything was geared around that. And I saw, you know, this is the evolution of a television show, and this is Sasha's moment. And I fixed my dressing room up real nice, and I would come in, and I would go upstairs, and I'd write a book. And I wrote, in the 7 years, I think I wrote 4 books on Step by Step. And then had an idea to do a talk show, went over and did the Suzanne Summers talk show. So I was kind of working in a crazed pace. I'd be at Universal producing and starring in the Suzanne Summers show, and coming across the street to Warner Brothers to rehearse when they needed me. And it was kind of irritating to the Step by Step people because I was not as available, but at the same time, they worked with me. They were really great. The great thing about Step by Step by Tom Miller, Bob Boyette, in the first year, they paid Patrick Duffy more than me. And they said, you've been off television a long time. You don't have a TV queue. He still has a TV queue. He's 2 weeks out of Dallas, and that's just the way it is. I said, I got it. I absolutely got it. Second year, they came to me one day and said, so we're going to bring your salary up to Patrick's. And he was making a lot of money. And I said, you guys are so cool. And I thought it was so smart, because they never had to put me in a position of saying, hey, come on, I'm pulling in now the same amount of people that Patrick is. And so they're pros. They're pros, and even when trying to make a breakout character, they're very honest with us. We want him to break out. So again, we saw the success of Sasha was the success. We all rise because of him, which did not happen on Three's Company. And I saw through the Miller Boyette template how it should work.
When Sasha went through his I guess legal problems and was off the show, did that affect the show?
It didn't affect the show, but it would affect the show during the shooting season, because we'd have to have an A script and a B script, because sometimes he'd show up and sometimes he wouldn't, or sometimes we'd have dinner and he'd leave. And, you know, he was just young and didn't get it. And he really should have been as big as the Fonz, and kind of his lack of understanding this is a business kind of worked against him. So it was a lot of work for all of us to have an A show and a B show, and that's just the way it was.
What about working with all those kids, just in general? Was that a pain, or was it good, or was it just varying depending on what kid you're working with in a scene?
Oh, I fell in love with all the children. They became my children. They came to me with their problems. I really got them. I really loved them, still see them. You know, I saw Patrick the other night. This is the way Three's Company should have been if it all had been handled well. So they're all still in my life. I saw Christine Lakin the other night. I walked into this, it was a tribute to TV dads, and I was showing up for Patrick Duffy, and I see this beautiful woman, young woman. She's standing there, and she kind of walks up to me, and I thought, gosh, who is she? Wow. And she said, you don't recognize me, do you? And I went, oh my God, Christine Lakin is drop dead gorgeous.
I saw her at that same event, and
gorgeous.
I thought, well, she was kind of the brainy blonde daughter,
and
right?
the tomboy.
Right,
the tomboy.
Right. Does Three's Company have a legacy, do you think? in terms of what being at the breakthrough or something that was sort of pioneering in television that people know now but maybe didn't think of then?
The press never wanted to give Three's Company its due. Three's Company will endure and live on. You know, it's still a huge show in Lebanon, in Israel. I see people from Israel all the time who say, yeah, the guy from Three in the apartment. It's a phenomenal success, and it always will be. It's you know, now with selling DVDs in year 1, year 2, year 3, it was just a show at a lucky time. We were all lucky to be in the right place at the right time, in that moment of time, and a naive time in our country too. It's too naive to ever do a show like that again, but people still love it. It's kind of a relief. I love when Nick at Night does Three's Company marathons. I watch them until it comes to the ones without me.
Do you think that women are more empowered now than they were back in the 70s when you were doing Three's Company in terms of television?
If I might give myself a little pat on the back, I was the first woman who asked to be paid what they were paying the men. I didn't get any credit as a feminist for doing this because the packaging was not right. You know, when Chrissy Snow walks in and goes, you know, I think you should pay me what you're paying the men, that just didn't look right. But now when I see women getting paid equal or even more, depending on how many tickets they're selling, I always take a little bit of, you know, I may have taken the hit for all of you, but because of me, and they realize all the millions, maybe into the billions of dollars they lost by losing that original chemistry. Who knows? If the original chemistry had stayed together, how long would that have stayed on? And they never again got the kind of ratings that they did when it was the three of us. And ratings are revenue. Ratings are dollars. So I think everybody learned a lesson from that. And many years later, when I was doing Step by Step, I was sitting at a affiliates dinner with the then president of ABC. His name was Ted Harbert. And he said, you know, I was in the mailroom at the time when all that was going on. He said, if today that happened again, he said, we never would have fired you. And I said, yeah, what was that about? He said, they didn't really understand that Three's Company was an anchor show. And by its very nature of the draw it had, that everything around it, including the next morning, succeeded because of being an anchor show. He said, it would have been treated as a business. He said, you were treated on a personal level. There was just a lot of personal stuff going on and vendettas, and he said that never would happen today in a business climate that is so competitive as it is today. What are you doing now? What are you doing today? Today I have such a fulfilling life. I just completed my 19th book. I was asked by Ernst & Young last year to be their keynote speaker at their Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. And so my husband liked the gig because it was near our home in Palm Springs, and it was a paid gig. And all the conditions were right, so we didn't have to fly anywhere. So the morning of the speech, he says, so what are you going to talk about? And I said, I don't know. I haven't grabbed it yet. I don't quite know. So we have this funicular that comes down the hill, and we're riding down the hill, and I get in the car, and we're driving. He says, got it yet? And I said, no, I don't know what I'm going to say. We pull up to the Marriott Hotel at the back door. The stage manager meets me, and he said, he brings me around to the wings. And we're standing in the wings, and I'm now listening to the host introduce me. And I'm thinking, I got to speak for 90 minutes. I better think of something to say. And he said, and she's an entrepreneur, and I don't know what else he said, but I thought, right, I am an entrepreneur. What do I sell? What do I sell? And then it hit me. I sell my problems. I had a father who was a child of an alcoholic. I figured it out, got better, wrote a book about it. People were helped. I gained weight in my early 40s, couldn't figure it out, found the science to losing weight, wrote 10 books about it, sold over 10 million copies, and everybody's happy because everybody's losing weight while they're eating. Then I went into menopause, and I lost all my hormones, and no doctor knew about it, and I figured out from going to doctor that you could restore your hormones naturally, these bioidentical hormones. Wrote The Sexy Years, became a huge bestseller. Then Ageless became a huge bestseller. Breakthrough became a huge bestseller. And I have this great contract at my publishing house. They call it the Woody Allen deal. It's whatever Suzanne wants to write, she can write, because it always sells over 1 million copies. And so my latest book is about cancer, because earlier this year, in November, I was horribly, for the second time, diagnosed with full body cancer. And for 6 days, with 6 doctors, was told that I was not going to live, and that if I didn't want to accept full body chemotherapy, that I should get my things in order. And it was the most devastating experience. You're walking into the shop.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was the most devastating experience, and when it turned out to be a horrible misdiagnosis, I realized I had been collecting names of doctors who were curing cancer without drugs, and that when you are diagnosed with cancer, that you're never given an option. It's only chemotherapy, standard of care, and there's no other option. And so I just finished that book, interviewing these doctors who are curing cancer and their patients who are living with stage 4, stage 3, 18 years, 21 years. So the big answer to your question is, in my, these years now, at 62 years old, I feel that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, being taken seriously, which when you start out as, People magazine once voted me the dumbest woman in America, that if you can come from being the dumbest woman in America to being taken so seriously that these books sell like that, and I feel such a responsibility, what a career. And I still get to go out and do nightclubs when I feel like it. I did a one-woman Broadway show, which got terrible ratings, but the audience loved it, and I'll never regret doing that. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. So I am fulfilled. I don't ever think of myself as someone who used to be. I'm still viable. I think that it's aspirational for women that age doesn't mean it's the party's over. You just keep reinventing and doing what you love, and it has to be an organic fit. It's not making up a subject. This is what I'm really passionate about: health, restoring hormones, longevity, living a long life, well and healthy. So I plan to be here. You might want to do another one of these when I'm 100, 110, because I'll still be here and my brain will still be working because I figured it out.
I hope I will be too. Do you miss acting? Are you open to anything that might come along in terms of that?
I don't think about acting except, God, I would love to bring back Mrs. Robinson.
What's your proudest achievement?
That I'm not a victim.
And what's your biggest regret?
Probably the way Three's Company ended. That, I'm sorry that it ended that way.
Any advice for aspiring actresses?
Yes. It's not about how much training you've had, although it certainly helps. If you just follow the flow of your life and be honest about it, you can make your life anything you want it to be. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter how crazy your life was. It doesn't matter what people thought about you. We all have the capacity to change and to make our life anything that we want it to be.
What do you know for sure?
That I deserve my little spot that I occupy on the planet.
And how would you like people to remember you?
That I made a difference, that I affected people's lives positively.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. About the Three's Company thing, but I think that that's part of the